Welcome, everyone, to the latest All Sports Betting Podcast, T20 World Cup previews. And we're done with the qualifying groups now. A and B are decided. It was a dramatic conclusion to Group B, Kev. I don't think it was the outcome. Well, it certainly wasn't the outcome we wanted or expected, sadly.
No, it wasn't. It was just a little bit annoying, wasn't it? Scotland just couldn't get going in the second 10 overs of their innings. And, you know, as is so often the case, you often think you need a hell of a lot more than you get. But actually, in these low-scoring games, just 10 or 15 more, if they could have just eked them out, it would have made so much more difference, mightn't it? And the annoying thing is, largely, one of the reasons why I took Scotland to win the group was a fade of the West Indies. I could have played Zimbabwe at 12s as well. It was a bit annoying, that one, but hey-ho.
It's one of them where I think you kind of had a really good read on the group, certainly the West Indies perspective. You know, it's a shame there wasn't actually a market for them not to qualify. Maybe there was one, but it's a group which I think on another day we could have really made a lot out of. And in the end, we had to be content with just the king West Indies top bat pick. Unfortunately, Obi McCoy obviously not going to be in the tournament anymore. So it is what it is. And we move on now to the main group stage. There's Group 1 and Group 2 now. So some different teams to look at. We're going to be talking here about Australia versus New Zealand, which is going to be from the Sydney Cricket Ground. And it's a local time kickoff, I think 6 p.m. Out there in Sydney. But yeah, a brand new venue for us to get stuck into here. So as per always, we bring the old Google Earth back out for this one. And Sydney, of course, on the east coast of Australia. We're going to go down into it, zooming in to the south part of Sydney, to the SCG. There's a stadium to the north of that. I have no idea what that is, but this is one of the most famous.
That's the Olympic Stadium to the north of it.
Do you know what? This is one of the most iconic cricket grounds in the whole world, the SCG. I mean, we look at this, that old stand there, that's probably 100 years old or something like that. I know it's done up a lot now, but it is a really nice, it's a proper cricket ground. That's one thing we've got to say for a start. It used to be known for its spin, did this place. I think, did they use dropping wickets now, though, here at the SCG, though? I don't know.
Not at the start of the summer. It's only when it clashes with other sport, but they don't have too much other sport here because, as you showed, the Olympic Stadium's right next door, which gets the other sport.
What sort of ground is this normally cricket in terms? I mean, can you... It's got some size to it, but it's not humongous.
No, it's not the biggest. I mean, you just have to look at that sort of view there, really. Again, as we've said previously when we've looked at these images, the dark green bit right in the middle, that's your square. So you can kind of see from there, really, that sort of bottom left as you're looking at it now, that's a pretty short hit to there. And that's what they call cow corner, isn't it? Where the left-hander's just going to swipe it to, the official term would be deep mid-wicket. That's generally where the big hits go. And then in the opposite direction, top right, it's no longer. So, yeah, if batsmen target the right areas, it's quite short. But if they play the wrong ones, say straight down the pitch, down the end that you've got the cursor now, that's pretty big looking. And you're going to need to give it a bit of a biff. But that's the case with all Australia grounds. You're right, though. This is a ground that is primarily spin heavy. Maybe not as much as it is in test matches because the New Year's test match is, sort of 2/3 of the way into the summer, isn't it? So it's already had a lot of cricket on it by then. So I don't think it's going to be that spin friendly in this tournament, but it is still the same groundsman. He still produces the same pitches, so he doesn't put an awful lot of grass on these pitches.
I say it's probably my favourite stadium in Australia. I've never been to Australia, but if I was to visit one venue, it would be this one. Obviously, I'd give the MCG a go as well, but get me a ticket in this stand here. I forget what it's called. It's got some famous name, this stand, but that is the SCG for you. And we're now going to have a look at some weather conditions for this game. And we've got not just a big problem here, Kev. We've got a massive problem, to be quite brutally honest with you, because we might not be getting any play at all. As you can see on this weather forecast I'm going to share with you here, this is Met Office. I've looked around lots of different sources as well. At the end of the day, this match is kicking off around, I think it's 6 p.m. local. It might be 5 p.m. local. There's a lot of showers around for this game, and it's my guess is as good as yours. What's going to happen? There might be a reduced match. We might get a full 40 overs in. At this point in time, there's a lot of question marks. And when you've got a forecast like this, it's a good job it probably is only 20 over game, in fairness. We've got to be looking at the rules and regulations. I mean, what is the minimum amount of overs this match can become?
5 overs, Steve, yeah. The good thing is that the rain's at the start of the day. So whatever the game, if there is a game, whatever it is, it'll be the same amount of overs for both sides if that forecast is right and we get that sort of 7 or 8 hour window of no rain from 7 o'clock onwards. So whether it's 5 overs, 10 overs, 15 overs, however many it is, it should be the same for both sides. So at least there, we're going to get a proper game of cricket, as opposed to if it was the other way around and the rain came sort of in the last hour of the game and one team's batted 20 overs, the other team's going to get 5 or 6 overs, and then the rain comes down. That is heavily skewed in the favour of the chasing side.
If you want to check out more about the two teams here, Australia and New Zealand, do take a watch of our outright preview show, which was done a week ago. And we've also got a special episode coming up soon to watch out for. We've got some individual team previews, bets for each team. But Australia against New Zealand then. Australia, obviously, the home nation in this T20 World Cup. And how are they looking heading into this match team news-wise? Is there any injuries to worry about?
Well, they've had a result in the lead up to this tournament, because when they went to India last month and against England earlier this month, they played Cameron Green, who's a very good cricketer. They played him in all of the matches in India. He opened the batting in India, and he played in both matches against England where he didn't open the batting. He kind of fluctuated up and down the order. But they played him, sorry, not England, West Indies, and they played him, but he's not in the squad for this tournament. So everyone's like, what the bloody hell are they playing him for? They should be playing people who are in the squad. He could only be brought into the squad if they had an injury. And lo and behold, on the golf course last week, Joss Inglis snapped a golf club in his hand whilst he was playing a shot. And it's cut his hand to the extent that he's no longer in the tournament. So obviously he's gone, and they've brought Cameron Green in. So they've had a stroke of luck there. And, you could argue, I like Joss Inglis, actually. I think he's a good player. But you could argue that the fact that Cameron Green bowls, bats, and is a superstar in the making, it's done them no harm at all, that move.
What is it about cricketers getting injured on the golf course at the minute? It's quite remarkable, isn't it, actually?
Well,
I don't know what to say about that.
That one's an understandable one, isn't it? But how Johnny Bairstow's broken his leg, I mean, that one's not quite so understandable.
He broke his leg at a golf course only 10 miles from me, called Panel Golf Course near Harrogate. And it's been a long time since I played that course because it's one of the hardest in the area. But I think what happened was he just slipped down a banking of a raised tea bed, from what I heard. The ambulance had to come and everything. So just a pure freak.
It's a dangerous game, that golf malarkey.
It can be a dangerous game, can't it? So on to New Zealand then. How are they looking heading into this game? What have they had warm-ups?
They've had warm-ups, yeah. They played in a T20 tri-series that they hosted themselves, Pakistan and Bangladesh. I mean, obviously they beat Bangladesh twice. They got through to the final with a win and a loss against Pakistan, but they lost the final of that tournament. They've got a few more issues, Steve. If you go back to the outright preview, their record in Australia, well, I don't even think horrific does it justice. In all 3 formats, bearing in mind these are fairly local, so they play each other quite a lot. In all 3 formats, you have to go back to 2011, the last time New Zealand won a game in Australia. We were watching it, that test match. Even that was a close run thing. They nearly blew that up.
10 runs, wasn't it? I think they won by.
Yeah, something along those lines. So that's 11 years ago. They haven't won a single game in Australia, be that a test match, an ODI, or a T20. And bearing in mind, there's been an ODI World Cup in this part of the world in that time as well. Like I say, horrific doesn't do it justice. So they've got that to overcome. They've also got some personnel problems. Daryl Mitchell was probably their best player at the T20 World Cup last year in the UAE. He was definitely their best player when they came over to England in the summer. He could not stop scoring runs. He turned into Brian Charles Lara, Donald Bradman, and anyone else. Sachin Tendulkar all in one, hadn't he, in that summer? He's out injured. They're hoping he's going to make it back at the end of this week for when they play Afghanistan, which I think is their 3rd game. But there's no guarantees of that, and they've already called up a replacement just in case. And they've also got issues with 2 bowlers. Lockie Ferguson, who's been coming back from an injury that he picked up just ahead of the 100, and Adam Milne, who missed the entire tournament of the 100 with injury as well. So those two are fighting their way back. They're probably going to need to play at least one of them here, given the conditions. So it remains to be seen if they're fit. Milne did play in that tri-series, so at least he's had some action, but not as much as I'm sure New Zealand would want.
It's no real surprise then to see Australia as the favourites here, about the 1.40 mark. The odds are shortening on them as well. Obviously, people fancy backing Australia. Let's just say the weather interfered with this game and it was, I don't know, 12 overs each. Who's it going to suit the better, having the match reduced in overs potentially?
Yeah, Australia, they've got way much more power in their batting. I mean, you look down New Zealand's batting lineup, it's likely to be Finn Allen opening the batting with Devon Conway. Well, Conway doesn't really hit it big. Then you've got Kane Williamson at 3, probably Glenn Phillips at 4, someone else at 5, Jimmy Neesham at 6, and a couple of bowlers who can give it a bit of a biff as well. Whereas Australia, Finch, Warner, Mitchell Marsh, that will be their top 3. Probably Glenn Maxwell at 4, Stoinis, David, Wade, they can all clobber it at 5, 6 and 7. And you've even got Cummins and Stark who can hit a long ball as well. So in terms of power hitting, definitely those, and also the Australia bowling attack. I like the New Zealand bowling attack, but for some reason they can't do it in these conditions, or don't do it in these conditions. And Australia will do. Obviously, you'd want this to be a 20-over game if you're betting, but those prices on Australia, as long as the amount of overs that each team face are equal, look a perfectly fair price to me.
You've got one bet for the game, and this is in the sixes market, the match sixes, under 11.5 match sixes, 3-unit pick at Bet Victor. What are the rules and regulations of this pick, Kev? I'm guessing if we do get reduced overs, then in any form, then this is going to be a void bet.
Yep, this is a void bet if overs are reduced. So it's one of the reasons why I'm taking it. I'm just taking it just in case it isn't reduced. If it is and we get a void bet, well, c'est la vie. Most of the market's going to be void in that case anyway. So, but this is the one that I think that if there is a game, we can get a payout on. And I say that for a couple of reasons. I just highlighted there New Zealand's lack of power hitting. Even if they did have some power hitting, it's pretty hard to get Hazelwood, Stark, Cummins, et al. Away. And they're clever enough, Australia. They play in Sydney so often that they'll know where they can bowl and where they can't bowl. And ditto really with Australia. They've still got that New Zealand attack to get away. Yes, they'll probably be slightly bigger in terms of hitting, but their batting hasn't really looked fantastic in home conditions this summer or spring, summer, whatever you want to call it. They didn't bat particularly well in an ODI series against Zimbabwe. They didn't bat much better in an ODI series against New Zealand. They weren't fantastic in a T20 series against West Indies, and they, apart from one game in Perth where you can't not score runs, they weren't fantastic against England either. So their batting's got a little bit of question mark over them. The other thing I like about the under here is, I mean, you're probably going to need an oar rather than a cricket bat, aren't you, to make your way through this pitch. It's obviously going to have been undercover right throughout the day, probably for in advance of that as well, because this rain down in Sydney is nothing new. There's actually a flood warning out there, so that's how much rain they've had. Just don't see this being conducive to good batting, really. And given that both sides have only had one sort of Mickey Mouse warm-up game in the last sort of 9 or 10 days, they could be undercooked a little. It doesn't strike me as a run fest, even a 20-over game.
Just that one pick then, under 11.5 sixes for this match. And if it is a reduced overs game in any format, then it will be voided. So just some thoughts on the top batsman market, as always, Kev. We'll start with Australia. Davey Warner's the favourite to top score for them. Mitchell Marsh, second favourite. Aaron Finch as well. I mean, it's a loaded batting lineup, this one, isn't it? If you had to lean towards anyone in this game, who do you think?
Tim David, probably. The chances are this is going to be a shortened game. It is very unlikely we're going to get 20 overs in. I would imagine Australia would move him up the order. He's the cleanest hitter. He's one of the most powerful hitters in the world game right now. It would make perfect sense, not just for this game, but also to make sure he's up to speed for future games. So Yeah, I'd take a chance that the new ball does a bit, which it has done in the 2 venues that we've seen in this tournament so far, hasn't it? And that someone down the order can take advantage of a softer ball and a wet ball, of course. So the bowlers are gonna get worse as the innings goes on. So yeah, take a chance on him. He's a big price.
And for New Zealand, then, just looking down this order, Devon Conway's the favourite. I've got to be honest, and I know my cricket. I've never heard of Finn Allen, so I don't know what he's like. But obviously, Kane Williamson, Martin Guptill as well, all a very similar price.
I could embarrass you and say he actually played for Yorkshire this summer, but I won't do that, Steve. Jimmy Neesham.
He played for Yorkshire. He played for Yorkshire. How many matches did he play?
In the T20 last year, he played for Yorkshire. 4 or 5, something like that. He opened the batting whilst.
I obviously wasn't following the T20 much this year. Then
I can't remember who it was who replaced him.
I've never heard of him.
Yeah, no, he did. I think it was Harris.
That's poor from me, but he can't have done much.
Played for Lancashire all of last season as well, so he's certainly been up in your neck of the woods. To answer your question though, again, I'd do similar with what we've done with New Zealand, and maybe take Jimmy Neesham to go up the order a little bit. 12-1. He's a clean striker of the cricket ball, and there aren't many of them in this side. Finn Allen's one, but I wouldn't want him going up against Josh Hazlewood and Mitchell Stark. So, yeah, I'd take a chance on him. I can see why Santner's been backed. He might also do that job, but I would imagine they'll go with Neesham first.
Okay, on to a recap then for this game, and I think probably we've got to issue a word of caution here with the weather around. If you are going to bet on this game, be mindful that a lot of markets will potentially end up getting voided if there's a reduction in overs. And it might be one of those, if you're watching it, sort of in running betting might be better sort of thing. And there's a lot of question marks. So sort of words of caution here.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's the first game we've seen at Sydney. We know there's been rain around. We don't know quite what the extent of the rain is, but we do know that this pitch won't have been able to have been prepared. They don't prepare pitches in the rain. So, have a look at the pitch and remember that old adage, you can't judge a pitch until both teams bat on it. So whatever happens in the first innings doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen in the second.
All right. Well, we've got that one pick to remind you of, under 11.5 sixes at BetVictor for 3 units. Hopefully, from that perspective, we get the full overs. There's nothing lost in that to weather, and we cash in on that one. So best of luck, Kev, and we'll catch you soon for the second match preview on Saturday.